Nostradamus and the Third Antichrist. This will only be the prophecy that's given at the end of the book, and it's published by Watkins Publishing, London. Mario Redding is the author. Part 3: The Third Antichrist, the one still to come. Global War I, date 2070. Nostradamus Index date 70, century number 5. From the regions governed by Libra, a great war will come, enough to disturb the mountains. Both sexes will be captured, and all Byzantium, so that cries will be heard at dawn from country to country. Prediction: if the two countries in the Librian balance of power are the US and China, as Nostradamus clearly established in two of his previous quatrains, 1/54, which would be 2054, and US-Chinese standoff, and 1/56 would be 2056, Islam disturbs the balance of world power. See my complete prophecies of Nostradamus. Then Byzantium, by which Nostradamus would appear to mean those Islamic countries once comprised within the old Ottoman Empire, will be the ember that lights the flame of global war. The war will be a nuclear one, powerful enough to disturb mountains, in which both men and women will fight in combat roles, particularly on the Islamic side. At the end of the war, either lamentations will be heard, or quite possibly the call of the muezzin or announcer echoing from country to country of the subjected region. Summary: the war begins triggered by the Islamic world. The United States and China finally face up to each other on a global arena. This one gives me a lot of problems, obviously. One is he's assuming that it's talking about Islam when it refers to Byzantium. Guess what? I don't agree there. Byzantium could just as easily be Russia, since it claims to be the inheritor of the Orthodox Roman Empire. So that could just as easily be them. As far as cries could be heard at dawn from country to country, I'm not so totally sure about that. I also take question with the fact that somehow or another he seems to still believe China is involved in this, because to me, again, I don't even understand how Asia could be even involved in something that's going on in the United States and Europe. So Russia seems to make a lot more sense. It's in the same area. Ukraine is still a problem for them, which I don't see how China can have that problem. Anyway, that's just my opinion. But otherwise than that, I don't have a problem with the actual storyline of that Islam disturbs the balance of world power, because, quite honestly, I do think they have. Subject: Global War II, date 2070. Nostradamus Index date is 70. The century number is 9. Slicing armor is hidden in the torches, inside Lion. On the day of the sacred mountain, those of Vienna will be put in the mincer if the Latin cantons Macon does not lie. The prediction: a continuation of the global war scenario. Nostradamus begins in 5/70, which would be 2070, and completes in 3071, which would be 2071. Macon is Muhammad, the name stemming from the poetization of the name of Mecca, Muhammad's birthplace. In classical and medieval romance literature, which Nostradamus would certainly have been familiar with. Praised, quoth he Macon whom we serve. Fairfax Trans Tasso XII 10. The mountain in line 2 is Mount Safa, which did not, of course, come to Muhammad. If the mountain will not come to Muhammad, Muhammad must go to the mountain. goaded on by his followers to produce a similar miracle to those Moses and Jesus were said to have wrought in testimony to their divine authority, Muhammad, irritated by their lack of belief, devised a strategy to bring them to their senses. He called Mount Safa to him, and when it refused to come, he thanked Allah because it would have fallen on us to our destruction. Here, the implication seems to be that the Western powers have called to the mountain, and it was fallen on them in the guise of nuclear weapons, slicing armor hidden in the torches. If we cast our eyes back to Quatrain 5/70, of course we also see that the coming Great War will be enough to disturb the mountains. The pun on Vienna and de Vienne in line 3 is also a neat one. The Congress of Vienna, 1814 to 1815, carved up Europe between the great powers, following the downfall of Napoleon, and the liaison of D and Vienne gives us the French for to become. There will be changes to the established order. Therefore, as a direct result of this conflict, it is perhaps useful to remember that the four great powers involved in the Congress of Vienna were Austria, the Habsburg Empire, Britain, Persia, the German Confederation, and Russia. Summary. Thermonuclear weapons are used on the battlefield. Whole mountains are destroyed. Efforts are made at peacemaking, but they are futile. Some parts of this translation did not seem to make a lot of sense to me, so I went through the French English dictionary to kind of go through what was written here in French. And I've come up with two possible things. One is Vienna. The spelling is actually Vienne. There is a place near Lyon in France. In fact, it actually is part of Lyon that is called that name. It was that first, which was at that time a Latin Italian province of Rome. So there's a possibility that that has something to do with it as well. So there's that bit. The other part is that I wonder if Lyon might not actually be referring to lion. And what I'm doing with here is I'm referring back to lion, as in for Britain. And what I've come up with is interpretation that I've come up with is peremptory harnessed, masked by flame inside Lyon, which would be Britain, there to abandon last rites to those the Vienna served much by the builder's imagination. Now I'm referring back to the part about Scotland during the EU vote, and it says here, I thought maybe the first part might have been about Scotland, and then it will be abandoned by France, which would be the European Union, and it would be helped by the European Union Constitution that was created by its founders. The problem that I had was with the definition he was giving, Mincer did not make any sense, especially when you consider that there was fire involved. So that's why I went through and tried to look this up in a different way. It still could go through for the same time period, just not exactly the way that he had interpreted it. Obviously, I'm a layman. I've never spoken French before. I had to go through a dictionary, so we'll see where it goes. Global War, Part 3, date 2070, and the index date is 70, the century number is 2. The spear from the skies will complete its extinguishing. It will speak of death, a terrible execution. The proud nation will be returned to the stone in the tree. Rumors of a human, brutish monster bring first catharsis, then sacrifice. These really are an extraordinary series of quatrains, all contemporaneous by index date and all with implications of nation-states brought low by global thermonuclear warfare. Why have they never been linked before? The index dates are categorical, and the symbols used are unequivocal. The spear, or dart, from the skies will Complete the extinguishing, a wonderful description of an intercontinental missile, for extendre in Old French means to stretch or spread, and extendre to extinguish. The S was later replaced by an acute accent. The concept of the stone in the tree means quite literally to be returned to the Stone Age, in which axes were made from split branches with sharpened cells. Looped in for heft, the human monster takes us back once again to 2035, and the birth of the third Antichrist, the first two being Napoleon, and then Stalin or Hitler. The seductive leader would be 2070, be 35 years old and in the full flow of his maturity. Summary. The war is nearly over. Unparalleled destruction has been rained upon the world. Entire countries are no more. The third Antichrist makes his move. I went through and looked at the French words again, and it appears to be talking actually like it might be some kind of an air collision between, with an airplane, and possibly because of like code, like speech, maybe some kind of jamming that takes place that causes the plane to crash, and that it would be considerable loss of life. I'm thinking this could have to do with Scotland. Maybe like whatever accident happens over Scotland, and that is what brings it back in with Britain. And that's about the best I can come up with at this moment. Global War 4, 2070. Index date is 70, century number is 8. He will enter, ugly, bad, and infamous. He will tyrannize Mesopotamia. Friends will pretend that the adulterous one has a soul. The land is horrible and black of aspect. Prediction. Is this the human monster mentioned in 2/70, 2070? Global War number 3. Who will bring first catharsis, then sacrifice? A better description of sycophantic expediency has never been penned than in line 3's friends will pretend that the adulterous one has a soul. Mesopotamia, of course, is modern-day Iraq, with a little bit of Turkey and Syria thrown in for good measure. Not much seems to be left of this former cradle of human civilization, however, and far from living up to the meaning of its name in Greek as being the land situated between two rivers, it now seems more a case of its being the land situated between a rock and a hard place. Summary. The third Antichrist attempts to benefit from the fallout of the global war. People want to believe him. He makes his power base in what remains of the Middle East. The words tous, Amy's, fate, the adulterine dame, to me seems to be saying assurance, Amy's, a name, fate, the adulterine, he takes his adultery, but it's actually born, and diami is with a soul, or of a soul. So I'm not quite sure how he comes up with adulterous one has a soul. Maybe I'm just not reading it right. So I guess I'll just have to let this one kind of go, but I just thought I'd point out that adulterous is not really what it says. The actual definition is born. So it sounds like maybe Amy could be giving birth. Maybe Amy's going to be the mother. Subject, Global War 5. Date, 2071. Index date 71, century number 3. The islanders will face a long siege. They will defend themselves vigorously. Those outside will be assailed by hunger. It will be a far worse famine than those which preceded it. This is directly following from 57, 970, 270, and 870, which would be 2070, the Global War, in which the U.S. and China go head-to-head in a thermonuclear contest. Nostradamus often referred to the British as the Islanders, and given the contents of 8/60/2060, England succeeds from the European Union, and 8/64/2064, consequences of England's secession from the EU, and the implications of a British famine that is only halted by a mass return to the countryside. One could extrapolate from this that the United Kingdom remains apart from the global conflict, reverting to the Fortress Britain role that it played during World War II, while war rages on the continent. Therefore, Britain becomes self-fueling and self-feeding, trusting to the spade. Those outside its borders face a terrible famine, but the United Kingdom, in a bid to save itself and its people, does not let them in. Summary: Britain has, for once, held itself aloof from the conflict. It now reaps the benefit, while a significant part of the rest of the world goes hungry. Britain has become self-sufficient and manages to feed its own people.